He goes to this private school, fancy private school, just north of London, where he's surrounded by the children of oligarchs. And so Zach himself was an upper middle class kid, came from a very comfortable family, lived in Maida Vale in West London. But he's exposed to these kids who are just rich in a different way. And he was very taken with that as an adolescent, and actually taken specifically with the Russian oligarchs. He was obsessed with Roman Abramovich, the owner of Chelsea Football Club. And so at a certain point, unbeknownst to his parents, he starts pretending that he's the son of a Russian oligarch, and he gets mixed up with some pretty dicey people.
And how is he able to do that? You need real cash to do that.
Well, it's interesting. So you need to be quick-witted, for one thing, and Zach turns out to have been extraordinarily good at lying, and at sort of selectively, almost like a magpie, kind of plucking some little detail of real life and then reincorporating it. He would tell people that he lived in One Hyde Park, which is one of the most expensive real estate developments. It's in Knightsbridge. And people would come and meet him there and pick him up at One Hyde Park. And he was always outside the building. They never saw him walking out. They always assumed he'd just come down in the elevator, but in fact, he was always just kind of showed up and he would meet people out front. That got him entree, but it also meant that he ended up surrounded by some pretty unscrupulous people who are really chiefly interested in his money.
And why did he do it? I mean, it's hard to analyze a teenager's psychology, but...
Well, part of what this book turned out to be, in a way that kind of surprised me, was it's in some respects a kind of a book about the challenges of raising an adolescent today, where Zach was on Instagram. I think he was very seduced by a kind of image of wealth, and kind of buccaneering wealth. And I think he wanted in. I think he wanted that. That was the life that he wanted. He wanted to live in a mansion in St. John's Wood. He wanted to drive a supercar. And
he thought in a way that he would bluff his way into this world with that little...
He thought he would fake it till he made it. And I have to say, there's a part of me, he didn't survive that night. He ends up in that apartment with a very dangerous man, and then he turns out to be a really fearsome gangster. He pulled this ruse on people who, in retrospect, you realize it was suicidally dangerous to have tried that with. But I think if he'd survived that night, there might be a chance that today he'd be some successful real estate impresario in London. And if you look around the culture, there are all kinds of people who do sort of fake it until they make it, con men who actually achieve the highest levels of success.
Let's get to the point we were talking about, the broader issue. Why did London become populated by these Russian oligarchs? I mean, there are obvious reasons, but they could have gone to Geneva or Zurich or, Dubai, and many did. But what do you think was what made London special?
You get a fascinating confluence of factors here in this history, and I tell this story in the book. But if we were to go to London in, say, 1955, London is the city that you would recognize from Dickens, right? In some respects. It is a port city. It's one of the biggest port cities in the world and has been for hundreds of years. And it's a manufacturing town. There are huge factories lining the Thames, belching smoke into the air. And what happens is, in a period of about 25 years, really from the late 50s into the early 80s, both of those things go away. All of the docks close. London ceases to be a shipping city, and all the factories close. It ceases to be a manufacturing town. And when Margaret Thatcher comes in, the city kind of has to reinvent itself, figure out what are we going to be. And there's a decision made. They deregulate the banking industry in '87, and London reemerges as a preferred destination for cash and people who have it. It becomes a money town. Then you get the kind of birth of the oligarchs, the dissolution of the Soviet Union, these huge fortunes which are accumulated practically overnight. Russia, during the collapse of the USSR, was a great place to be making money if you were a capitalist, but once you've accumulated those billions, not a great place to hold on to the money. You want to get it out of Russia and possibly get yourselves out. And so you have this generation of oligarchs who find safe harbor in London. And London, I think, kind of getting the sense of where things are going, rolls out the red carpet. There is this recognition that we want this kind of money. There's a golden visa program. It's interesting that the United States now introducing its own golden visa program. Well, London did that a while back. And actually, this was a big thing that brought in a lot of oligarchs and their billions.
And you said that one of the things you realized was that the police was not really that interested in delving too deeply into the underworld of this Russian oligarch, the oligarchy plus the crime that went with it. Why?
I think for a couple of reasons. One is that if you look at the Metropolitan Police, it's interesting. I mean, Scotland Yard still has great branding. We still think of it as one of the great police forces in the world. I think in reality, it's not really fit to purpose at this point. You've had decades of cutbacks and so forth. But I think there's something else going on here too, which is that at a certain point, the welcome to these oligarchs is so warm that Moscow starts sending assassins to British soil to conduct hits. There's a kind of learned behavior on the part of the authorities to just say, we don't want to look too closely at this. You get the whiff of international intrigue, and what you find is that the Metropolitan Police very frequently will say, looks like an accident, looks like a suicide.
Has there been a reckoning with all of that after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, particularly the 2022 full-scale invasion?
I think that to some degree there has, at least rhetorically there has. I mean, I think that there is lip service to the idea that changes need to be made. I think some of the features that made London so compelling, for instance, non-dom status in which people don't have to pay, wealthy internationals don't have to pay taxes in the UK on money made abroad, that is now getting rolled back. There's a little bit more transparency in the housing market than there was before. So there have been changes that I think will be significant. But the thing that's really interesting is when some of these oligarchs got sanctioned after the invasion, there were other wealthy people from places like the Gulf or places like China who essentially saw this as an opportunity. Suddenly these mansions come up for sale and the new generation of rich arrivistes swoop in.
And what did you learn about raising an adolescent?
A lot. I mean, it was, I have two adolescent sons myself. I think this is, I spent a lot of time talking to this family, the Brettlers, and I think that, it's interesting, they grew up in the 1960s and their parents took an approach to parenting that was sort of typical of England in the 1960s. Laissez-faire, to put it mildly, really hands-off. And then they're parenting Zach in the early aughts when the whole approach is much different. But it was, it was kind of humbling in a way to see the way in which, for parents whose kids have a phone, and the phone opens up these vistas and exposes them to people who they could be sitting on the couch right across from you, and you think you have an eye on them, but in fact, they're 100 miles away, hanging out with people that you don't see and don't know. And part of what was shocking for the Brettlers was that after Zach died, and after the police kind of failed to get to the bottom of this, these parents had to become detectives. They had to actually go out and investigate themselves. And this journey kind of took them into London's underworld, talking with people, interviewing people, tracking down people he knew. I think that the things that they learned about their son after his death made me want to hold my own kids, that much closer. And try and find a way to kind of keep them in my orbit without smothering them to a point where you don't allow them to grow up and become their own people, which is an important part of adolescence as well.
Russian attacks continue to strike fear around Ukraine's capital. 7 people were killed in a suburb of Kyiv on Monday. 29 others were injured, including 4 emergency responders. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military says it struck Russia's largest oil refinery more than 1,500 miles from Ukraine's border. That strike could worsen growing gas shortages in almost all of Russia's 83 regions. Kyiv's pressure campaign is also targeting the highly contested Crimean Peninsula. CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh has the latest.
Ukraine is hitting Russia hard where it all began. Occupied Crimea. Taken first in 2014, it is a peninsula, and that makes it very vulnerable to being cut off. There are 2 ways, in or out. First is the Kerch Bridge, which Ukraine has been hitting for years, and it's now beset by queues of thousands of anxious Russians trying to get out. Second is the land bridge through occupied Ukraine. Many saw this as a big strategic gain from Russia's invasion in 2022, a way to cheaply and permanently connect Russia to this tourist mecca, the jewel of the Soviet past.
Coast of the Crimean Peninsula, a national resort.
Крым и сакральное значение.
так же, как и Храмовая гора в Иерусалиме.
Ukraine's 2023 counter-offensive tried to break through here, but failed, hitting huge Russian defences. Now they're flying over them. New mid-range Ukrainian drone capability striking the road along the land bridge and Crimea's air defences, leaving it vulnerable. And then the actual bridges to Crimea and the Russian trains and the roads, now they're hitting ordinary infrastructure, refineries, power stations, meaning power cuts in the cities. Queues at gas stations, thick black smoke on the skyline, so yet more Russians are leaving. Zelensky recently claimed that Russia has had to prioritise air defences in Crimea and around Moscow as well. Putin has recently accepted economic challenges and indeed gas shortages as Ukraine's drone strikes increasingly cause chaos in ordinary Russian life. So what's the goal here? Make Crimea hard to live in, a place without tourists, gas, power, affordable food, and the land bridge to it, already itself a tough place to live in, seems less worth the cost. And this is the wider point for Kiev. Seize on the growing questions inside Russia as to what the war is even for. If Crimea is effectively uninhabitable and the only gains they can claim are tiny bits of land, usually rubble, in the Donbass, turn Crimea from a jewel in Putin's crown to leverage for Ukraine, perhaps in any future peace talks, or even into a damaging thorn in Putin's side as he tries to navigate growing dissent about his war of choice.
President Zelensky has made a fresh plea for more air defense missiles. Whatever NATO allies decide will be key to Ukraine's ability to protect its skies. But it's also happening as Russia, too, is seeing increasing losses of both territory and of troops. Michael Kaufman is a military analyst and a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. In his latest article for Foreign Affairs, he describes this moment as an inflection point for Russia, which could shape its long-term military strategy. You also write that Kyiv's strategy of making this war futile for Russia is working, and I'd like to ask you to elaborate on that, specifically as it relates to what we're seeing in Crimea, where you have Russian-installed authorities now declaring a state of emergency. We have blackouts, fuel reserved for the state there on shortages. The Kerch Bridge has been choked off, a real blockade happening at what has been a crown jewel for Vladimir Putin. Is this the point that you were trying to make, just one example of Ukraine's strategy right now?
Yeah, absolutely. There are several parts to Ukraine's strategy. The first is stabilizing the front line, and they've done a good job of that, especially since in recent months, they've really gone after longer range strikes into Russian operational depth and have choked off Russian logistics. And so the Russian offensive effort has stalled for many months now. Another one is isolating Crimea and using that as a pressure point. Crimea now has a real energy and fuel crisis there, under the belief that Moscow cares a lot more about Crimea than it might care about many other regions of Ukraine that's trying to occupy, and essentially using that also to gain leverage. And lastly is the deep strike campaign into Russia, targeting Russian energy export infrastructure, Russian fuel refineries. Russia's undergoing a fuel crisis with long lines at the gas stations across the country, and also key nodes in the Russian defense industry to reduce the Russian production of missiles and various strike drones.
And despite all of these challenges that Russia is facing, you yourself describe them as visibly struggling. You also say they can reconstitute into a major threat in 5 to 7 years. What do you base that timeline on?
Sure. And there are active debates. I mean, NATO actually often pegs it to a much shorter timeline, within only a few years after the Russia-Ukraine war. And the reality is that the debates on how long it will take Russia to reconstitute are really narcissism of small differences. At the end of the day, in defense planning terms, anything less than 10 years is a rather short timeline. And what I base it on is the assumption of how long it might take Russia after this war, even though its military has been degraded, although it also has expanded and improved in other ways, to regain the ability to functionally employ that force on a larger scale, right? Now, Russia after the war may be able to conduct all sorts of small or limited type scenarios that might threaten NATO members. But the thing that should really concern the alliance is a large-scale invasion or large-scale assault on one of its member states. And for that, I think it might take a bit longer. But that said, the important point is that even though the Russian military has been degraded, it is likely to reconstitute. We're not debating the if so much as we are only debating the when.
Joining me now is Ukrainian Parliament member Kira Rudik. And she joins us now, as I said, from Kyiv. Good to see you. I am wondering what you believe President Zelensky can achieve at this NATO summit, because I don't have to remind you, the United States itself may be low on those interceptors. So what does Ukraine need to get from this NATO summit right now?
Hello, Paula, and thank you so much for having me. As you said yourself, it is critical for Ukraine to get the interceptors, as right now Russia outpaces the United States in production of the ballistic missiles against the production of the anti-ballistic missiles that we desperately need. What President Zelensky can get there is additional support and at least promises of the delivery of the missiles that we need, but also to continue on the discussions that we have heard started in Paris regarding getting the technology to produce the Patriot missile systems to Ukraine, so we can at some point produce them ourselves and strategically be able to defend ourselves in the future. That would be a life changer and a game changer for us. And because we obviously understand that the situation when there is not enough of those missiles in the world is critical for us and gives Russia unnecessary leverage at this point.
You know, and I do know that, in fact, in Ukraine, you guys are confident that if you get that permission, you can actually build these fairly quickly. I am wondering, though, that even though Russia looks wounded right now, and you only have to look at the gas situation in Russia to see that, and obviously some developments on the front line, do you worry that Ukrainians should brace themselves for so much more escalation now? I mean, watching those civilian targets overnight in Ukraine, and it's been the case for several weeks now, it can't be easy.
It's not easy, Paula. But what is the alternative? What is the option? Unfortunately, the real peace deal or the real ceasefire was never at the table. If you look at Russia's actions and not listen to what Putin says, trying to fool President Trump, the truth is Russia never intended to stop. They have started a full-scale invasion and they continue terrorizing our peaceful cities because they do not have real gains at the front line, and they will continue doing that no matter what we do. The only thing that we can do for ourselves is to fight back, to brace ourselves, and again, find a way to defend our people. And this has been a case for us since the day one, because Russia would not stop unless they are stopped. We have proved that by the fact. And we are hoping that finally the leaders of the world will realize that.
I'm wondering what you believe Russians themselves may realize. Obviously, arguably, Russians do not have any influence over what Vladimir Putin does, but have you seen any indication that it might be the Russian people themselves that would be just so fatigued with this war now that it is on their doorstep?
Russian propaganda is very strong, and Russians in their majority support the war. We can see that by their social media, but also we can see that by the progress of Russian army being supported and added with the new recruits. So we have no hope that at some point Russians will rebel. But what we have hope that Putin's inner circle may become less supportive of the war and create the political instability that may pressure Putin into ending the war or at least agreeing to a ceasefire. Coming back to the Patriot missile systems, Paula, I think it's important to mention that it's not the only way of producing more of them. We can pressure Putin to produce less of the ballistic missiles. And for that, sanctions need to actually start working. Because right now, the majority of the ballistic missile is made of the Western components that 4.5 years into the sanctions are still somehow being delivered to Russia, becoming a part of the deadly weapons that are coming our way. So this is another way of working with it, and I hope that President Zelensky is bringing up it to President Trump.
Yeah, the sanctions at times have proven ineffective, even though even European countries have promised to get tougher with those sanctions. Kira Rudik, good to see you again, and we'll leave it there for now. Thanks so much.
EU leaders are convening in Brussels with Ukraine high on the agenda. Kyiv just launched its biggest attack on Moscow since the war began. Moscow says nearly 200 drones were shot down overnight, part of a broader Ukrainian barrage on Russian territory. And the Kremlin says the latest Ukrainian attack set back the prospects for a face-to-face meeting between Presidents Putin and Zelensky.
It is fair to say that Ukraine's latest attacks does not bring personal contacts between the head of the Kyiv regime and our president any closer, does not bring them closer. Europeans are clearly insisting that the war must continue, basing this on a completely incorrect and false assumption that the situation on the battlefield is supposedly shifting in favor of Ukrainian forces, which is categorically untrue. From this point, they are trying to influence Trump to take a more clearly pro-Ukrainian position.
Well, Sebastian Shukla is following developments from Berlin. So, Seb, what more can you tell us about what happened here with these attacks and that response we've just had there from the Kremlin?
Yeah, Chrissy, I think the ferocity of these attacks last night is clear to see and very, very evident from those images. If we can play them again, there is one in particular that I'd like viewers to see, which is the Moscow city skyline covered with black plumes of smoke. And that is just a real indictment about the level of the attack that the Ukrainians unleashed this morning or late last night on the Russian capital. The focus was an oil refinery here. I mean, it has left several people wounded. There are no dead. But the fact that the Kremlin or the Kyiv have been able to launch an attack like this, as is becoming the kind of the symbolic way that both sides are fighting each other at the moment in this war, nevertheless sends a message to the Russian people and to the Russian president that Kyiv is able to bring the war home to Russia. And as the Ukrainian president called it a little while ago when he was at NATO, he said that all of these attacks are completely and utterly justified as retribution for Moscow's attacks on Kyiv. And subsequently, we've been hearing from the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, too, speaking ahead of that NATO summit that you just mentioned. Take a listen to what he had to say about the attacks last night.
We have the tools, and they are strong enough to put Russia on path where diplomacy becomes the only choice. We all see that Putin is now relying on one lasting thing, constant missile attacks. And he has ballistic missiles, so we need anti-ballistic capabilities.
So anti-ballistic capabilities there, Chrissy, what he's talking about is there has obviously been huge development in this warfare on both sides towards drone warfare, that both sides able to attack each other with consistent ferocity. What the Ukrainians are hoping now is that attacks like these are eventually able really to force President Putin to the negotiating table, and the message that he's sending around Brussels today, the meeting at NATO that I mentioned, the upcoming EU summit, is to try to bring the Europeans back together as they have been for some time now, just to refocus and double down efforts and remind President Putin that Kyiv and Brussels are able to hurt him where it hurts the most.
Sebastian Shukla there from Berlin. Thanks very much, Seb. Well, let's get a bit more on the Ukrainian attack on Moscow and what it says about the wider conflict. Nigel Gold-Davis is a senior fellow for Russia and Eurasia at the International Institute for Strategic Studies and a former British ambassador to Belarus. Thank you so much for joining us. So, look, the attacks overnight that we've seen are the biggest in 2 years and an example, I think, of Kyiv's dramatically improved drone capabilities since the start of the war. I mean, how much are these long-range attacks, particularly as we saw last night, focused on oil refineries, not just frustrating, but seriously weakening Russian momentum in the war?
Yes, absolutely. This is a very
good. Right there! Time to sleep! All the best! Time to sleep! All the best! Time to sleep! All the best! new challenger. Round one. Fight! Challenger. Round one, fight! Challenger. Round one. Fight! Air Here comes a new challenger. Round one. Fight! challenger. Round one. Fight! Here comes a new challenger. Round one. Fight! Moving in. Damn. Right there. Here comes a new challenger. Round one, fight! Right there!
visible